Is revenge ever really justified? We'll see. Hi there, I'm Roux. Welcome to my video, and welcome to a day when we explore a new subreddit. Exciting! Someone contacted me on Instagram, a fan of mine, which blows my mind. I want to redial myself when I was 11 and insecure, and I'd be like, don't worry, people will like you in the future. But yeah, their name is Taz, and they had a brilliant suggestion that I should make a ProRevenge Reddit video. I had never heard of this subreddit before, but once I took a quick look, I was like, tasty. So that's what we're doing today. Taz suggested I should do this subreddit, and he said he wanted to give me a virtual ice cream for it. I don't know where you can find a virtual ice cream, but you can give me a coffee on Ko-fi if you want to, but that's up to you though. I think you can change the settings if you want to. If I were to though, I would change it into iced tea because your girl is addicted. But you have to have a pro membership to do that, so for now, it's just coffee, but we all know it's iced tea. Is revenge ever really justified? We'll see. With these stories, Dorm Hitler, federal crime, back to school, and Valentino. Let's get into it. Dorm Hitler got my freshman dorm leader fired a year after he called the cops on me. I first got to college my freshman year, and I met the dorm leader, the RA at most schools. Like most colleges, the dorm leader was the upperclassman that lived in the dorms and monitored the freshman halls. My dorm leader's name was Julio, fake name by the way, and at first, he seemed like a nice dude that minded his own business. He talked about how he would stay out of everyone's business if we would stay out of his. Also, he tried to be the cool dorm leader, and always mentioned to me about how he drank tons of alcohol his freshman year in the dorms. He gave off the impression he really didn't care if we ever drank in our dorm rooms, but just to keep it on the down low if we did. I really didn't drink much at all, but I appreciated the fact that he seemed pretty normal and didn't try to rat on kids. During the last week of October of my freshman year of college, I had one of the hardest weeks of my academic career. I was a biochemistry major taking some pretty tough classes and had 3 exams that week. At the end of the week, a friend I had recently made down the hall invited me to his dorm room to watch an upcoming NBA game. As we were watching the game, he had a bottle of vodka and gave some to the guys in the dorm. Being a naive and stupid freshman kid just trying to make some friends, I took 1 shot of vodka and continued to watch the game. As we were watching the game, one of the guys in the dorm spills a bottle of soda and rushes to the bathroom to grab some paper towels. As he walks out of the dorm room, Julio walked by and noticed the bottle of vodka. He laughed and said something of the sorts of, "I remember when I was a freshman. Just try to keep it down." We thanked him and told him to have a good night. It seemed like a normal conversation and nothing out of the ordinary. 30 minutes later, we hear a knock on the door and 2 policemen showed up with breathalyzers. They told us they had received a complaint from Julio about underage drinking and a party being thrown in the dorm room. Remember, it was 3 guys watching a Lakers game on a Thursday night at 8 p.m. I ended up getting a minor in consumption charge for blowing a .02. Had to do 20 hours of community service, a reflection journal, and appear to the Judicial Affairs Center at my college about my supposed drinking problem. I'm not blaming the officer for giving me a ticket, but I was pretty upset that Julio, who always talked about getting shit-faced freshman year in the dorm, called the police right after he essentially gave us the okay for the night. A few weeks later, I see Julio and straight up asked him why he decided to rat me out. Specifically, I asked why he didn't just tell me to head back to my dorm if he had a problem with the alcohol instead of calling the police right after our conversation. He responds, word for word with, "You made a decision and had to suffer the consequences of that decision." After that incident, I never really talked to him, but he always tried to be buddy-buddy when he saw me in the hallway. Anyway, I eventually leave the dorms and move off campus for my sophomore year. I had decided to rush a fraternity my freshman year and ended up meeting some really nice guys. I have never been the fraternity type, but I went to a smaller college where fraternities are a lot different than most places. During the second semester of my sophomore year, my fraternity was taking a new pledge class. One day, I received a text from Julio saying, "One of the guys pledging your fraternity has been caught dealing alcohol to other freshmen in the dorms. I thought I would let you know." Turns out, Julio was the dorm leader for a freshman pledging my fraternity and ratted him out to judicial affairs as well. Thinking the term dealing alcohol was the lamest/funniest thing I've ever heard, I sent that to our fraternity GroupMe and everyone laughed about it. About a week later, that kid pledging our fraternity came up to me asking about the message I received from Julio. Essentially, a pretty similar thing happened to him like what happened to me. Julio found out that he had given another kid in the dorm a bottle of wine and reported it to the police. This kid ended up getting a minor in possession and had to speak with judicial affairs. This is where the story gets hilarious. In his meeting with judicial affairs, the kid pledging our fraternity told the judicial affairs guy that his dorm leader, Julio, was now a senior at this point, had texted me about the charges pending against him. Apparently, it's a huge violation to discuss pending cases against a freshman in your dorm to a third party. The judicial affairs guy told him that if he could prove Julio was discussing this charge with a third party, aka me, he would receive severe sanctions. Basically, if I sent that text to the judicial affairs people, Julio would be in a shitload of trouble. So I sent the text that night to the judicial affairs people. After that, I didn't hear anything about what happened to Julio and had honestly forgotten about it. However, nearing the end of the school year, my sophomore year, I saw Julio at the dining hall and he came up to speak to me. He tells me a story about how he knows I was the one who ratted on him to judicial affairs. How he ended up getting fired from his dorm leader position, lost the scholarship money his dorm leader job provided him, and overall how shitty his life has been since he got fired. After going through his entire sob story, he asked me, "Why did you do that? This could have been handled completely differently. I didn't have to get fired and I could have kept my scholarship money." I look him dead in the eye for what seemed like 30 seconds and say, "Julio, you made a decision and had to suffer the consequences for that decision." That is so sweet. Here's the thing, it's not the fact that they got ticketed, it's the fact that Julio was playing wishy-washy with them. He was like, "Oh, it's all cool, bro," and then goes, "I have reported you to the police." Like some sort of Sanctimonious Draco Malfoy. Like, what the hell? Am I the only one who gets the feeling like his stories about how he got so shit-faced during his freshman year are all a bunch of lies, and he's hella bitter that nobody invited him to any parties because they were like, "Julio's gonna tell someone if we have any liquor, so, we're not inviting Julio. Julio is a buzzkill." And he's just like, "I'm going to get that position and I'm going to punish every single sophomore." Yeah. I would say this revenge was just desserts and quite justified. Next! Federal crime. A redneck thinks it's funny to yank out mailboxes. My dad makes him pay. So, way back in the day, mid-90s or so, my family lived in a log cabin on 10 acres of land in a rural area, 10 minutes or so out of town. It wasn't really the sticks, but you could definitely hear banjo music in the background sometimes. At the end of our nearly 1/4 mile long driveway was one of those roads that was also technically a state highway. In the AM, I'd trudge down to wait for the bus. When I got home, I'd grab the mail and carry it back. Until one Monday morning, when I went out and noticed the mailbox was gone. On closer inspection, it looked like it had just been ripped out of the ground. Dad was obviously not pleased. He went to talk with the county sheriff, who happened to live a mile down the road. Turns out it had been happening up and down the road for months. Someone was tossing a chain over mailboxes and yanking them out with their vehicle. He suspected a guy down the road with his great big lifted 4-wheel truck, but couldn't prove anything. Usually happened on Saturday and Sunday nights, with people finding out in the morning. It also seemed like the nicer the mailbox, the bigger the target, and many had been hit multiple times. People tried digging deeper, using more durable wood, etc. The guy just took it as a challenge and ripped them out again. soft, sandy ground, and his truck was a monster. Well, Dad said, challenge fucking accepted. A bit about my father. He's a steelworker with an engineering background and a graduate degree. Built like a bear, with forearms the size of my frickin' legs. Most people looking at him would never think this monster of a man is also brilliant. But he is. The calm, cool type that almost never loses his temper. But wrong him, and God help you. So Dad goes to Lowe's and buys the fanciest, prettiest mailbox they sell. He then proceeds to install it on top of an 8-foot-long cylinder of 3-inch diameter hardened tool steel. But he wasn't done there. After digging down with post holders and dropping it in, he then filled it in with quickset concrete. To really sell it, he then used some strips of 1/2-inch wood to cover the steel core of his now indestructible mailbox of doom. Primed and painted them so it looked like a standard post. He then even had my mom decorate it with flowers and such. He wanted it to be as tempting a target as possible. Didn't even take a week. I went out for school in the morning and found the mailbox right where it should be. Attached to it was 30 feet of chain and an entire hitch assembly, ripped right off the truck's frame, sheared the bolts. It was marvelous to behold. Sheriff gets called over and dies laughing when he sees it. He went to the house of the guy that was suspected and, sure enough, verified the damage to his truck and it matched. Fun fact, fucking with a mailbox is a federal crime. As in, you go to federal prison. Not those cushy state places. Dad was unofficially rewarded by the sheriff's department with a few cases of beer and some venison. And after that, every deputy in town would flash him a thumbs up whenever they saw him. And then they all clapped and cheered, and it was just the most brilliant thing that has ever happened. No, I'm just kidding, but you know. Edit, apparently vandalism to mailboxes is far more common than I thought, and other people have taken similar measures. I guess great minds think alike. And, as many have commented, apparently federal prison is actually a lot better than state. Didn't know that, sorry. Yeah, but prison's prison. Cage nonetheless. I find it hilarious that, like, a grown man would go out vandalizing mailboxes. Like, what are you, a teenager forever? Justified, yes. Justified revenge. Next! Back to school. Made an asshole redo an entire school year. During the final trimester of my last year of high school. Don't you mean semester? Anyways, we had to do a group project that needed to be finished by the end of the trimester and was evaluated and graded in front of a jury of teachers instead of an exam. I was paired with the biggest douchebag in class. Imagine a really entitled, arrogant asshole. Every time we were supposed to work on the project, he would have some excuse to not show up and demand that I would work on it alone to make sure the project stayed on track. In the beginning, I tried to complain and talk to the teacher, but she would just say, "Make it work, it's your project." After a while, I stopped planning work meetings altogether. He would just call me to ask how the project was going, and I would say something like, "Yeah, it's going well. I think it's almost finished," or "I'll send you the presentation to prepare for the jury." Little did he know, I had a trump card in my hand. The project counted for 40% of the final grade. Me doing well in the class already had about 55 of the other 60%, so even if I got a 0 on the project, I would still pass the class. The asshole had less. A lot less. After it became clear that he was just going to use my work to pass the class and the teacher didn't care, I decided to throw out all work for the project and keep the asshole in the dark. The last bit went a lot easier than expected, as he was happy with me telling him that everything was on track. In the last week before the jury presentation, things became harder. The asshole wanted me to send the presentation so he would know which part he had to present. I managed to stall a few days with excuses, but 2 days before the jury presentation, I finally sent him an email with the PowerPoint, which was actually an MP3 file with a changed file extension. The next day, I switched off my phone. In the evening, I called him back with the excuse my phone had issues, and he was panicking that there was something wrong with the PowerPoint. I told him not to worry. I will check it out tonight and have a working PowerPoint for tomorrow. I would come to the school at 8 a.m. so he could practice his part for the presentation before the jury appointment at 9 a.m. The next morning, I arrived at school a little before 9 a.m., having switched off my phone again. When he saw me, he approached me with a mix of panic and anger. But before I could explain anything, we were called into the room with the jury for our presentation. I just told the asshole to not worry and let me do the talking. We greeted the jury and I started the introduction. The original idea of today was for us to present our project XYZ. But since I already have enough points to pass the class, and Mr. Asshole over here couldn't be bothered to put in any effort, I decided to skip it, and instead have a nice day off today. That concludes our presentation. Thank you for your attention. I just walked out on 4 confused teachers and 1 asshole with a mouth opened so wide it looked like he was trying to eat a club sandwich vertically. Naturally, there was some backlash in the days after that. The teacher called for an explanation, but in the end recognized I was a good student and I indeed already passed the class without the project. Asshole was angry that he had to study over the summer for a re-exam. All in all, I was happy to have graduated and looked forward to going to college the next year. After the summer, I heard from friends that Asshole failed his re-exam and that combined with other bad grades, caused him to have to redo his last year. Karma's a bitch. Your teacher sucks though, oh my god. I hate teachers who are so lazy that they're just like, it's your project, like, you deal with it. Like, that's why I always hated group projects, because the teachers would just treat it as if it was just some sort of like off day for them. They just didn't help you at all when you had like an uncooperative asshole in your group. When I was in elementary school though, I was that asshole one time and it made me feel so bad. It still haunts me. Yeah. But I learned my lesson. I honestly think the teacher should have some consequences. Like, damn, they were not doing their job. So, also, justified revenge. Next. Valentino. He ruined my sister's only birth experience, so I made sure he'd never forget her. Kinda my revenge, kinda my sister's, both of us really proud. This is gonna be long, so take a seat. Here's our cast. My sister, we'll call her Sarah for the story. My sister's ex-boyfriend, we'll call him Paul. Ex-boyfriend's new wife, we'll call her Jane. Ex-boyfriend's parents, Mr. and Mrs. Doe. Oldest brother, Zeke. And our parents and me. When I was 14 and my oldest sister Sarah was 22, we found out that she was pregnant with Paul, her boyfriend of 4 years. They immediately got engaged and they were really happy. For a time, Sarah had a horrible pregnancy. About 16 to 18 weeks in, the wonder of creating human life evaporated within her. She developed hyperemesis, which, if you don't know what it is a really bad morning sickness. You can literally die from it because you become so dehydrated. It's crazy. She was constantly in pain. She developed gestational diabetes and all around hated the experience. Around this time, Paul, the then fiancé, started getting sick of the complaining. I believe the argument was, your body is built to do this. It can't be that bad. Your body's also built to pass kidney stones if you get them, and that's not comfortable either, Paul. Let's continue the story. Sarah was due on Valentine's Day, and Paul's parents, Mr. and Mrs. Doe, were very excited, both about the grandkid and the fact that he would be born on a holiday. She was very against that and really, really hoped that her son wouldn't be born on a holiday, even one as small as Valentine's Day. Her birthday sometimes falls on Easter and she hates it, because it might make him feel like that his day isn't very much about him. Well, Mrs. Doe says something like, well, if you name him Valentine or Valentino, then that'll make the day even more special to him. Again, sister hated the idea. She thought it was tacky, he'd be bullied for it, and just really didn't like the name Valentino. Paul loved it, but agreed to go with a more average name like Daniel or Jared. Fast forward to February, and she was ready to get this over with. Sarah had officially been put on bed rest because while standing or walking, her blood pressure took unexpected spikes or dips. I look back now, and goodness, do I feel bad for her. She was doing her best to avoid giving birth on Valentine's Day because, again, she didn't want him born on a holiday. Unfortunately, births happen when they happen, and that baby was going to come on Valentine's Day, whether she wanted him to or not. I remember waiting out in the waiting room with my dad, brothers, and Paul, who couldn't stand to be in the delivery room because it was gross. I was so mad that he could have gone in but wouldn't because he thought my sister was gross while giving birth, whereas I had to stay outside because I was too young to go in with my mom and other sister. Dad went home with the youngest 2 brothers, while the oldest, Zeke, stayed to watch me because I refused to leave. 16 hours after Sarah went into labor, my little nephew was officially part of the family on the evening of Valentine's Day. Unfortunately, Sarah was not okay. She had to have an emergency cesarean section, and while doing the operation, discovered that the back of her uterus, facing her spinal cord, had a very large and very severe, thankfully non-cancerous, tumor. When I say large, I mean it was twice the size of a standard uterus. The doctors were shocked and didn't understand why nobody had noticed it on an ultrasound. It accounted for her severe back pain and blood pressure issues. The doctors immediately went in for more surgery to remove the tumor, but sadly ended up having to perform a full hysterectomy. This meant that my nephew would be Sarah's only child. Now, while Sarah was in for surgery, Paul was taking care of everything baby-related to make sure his son was okay. In my 14-year-old self's memory, I remember him being suitably distraught, but I didn't really pay him much mind and spent my time in the waiting room with my mother and other sister. Zeke, however, wanted to be a good future brother-in-law and make sure that Paul was okay. He found Paul filling out the baby paperwork on his own, looking, in my brother's words, like he had not a single worry in his mind. Zeke asked why Paul didn't wait for Sarah to fill in the paperwork, as she should be out of surgery within the hour, and Paul said that he just wanted her to get rest and heal. That checked out with Zeke, as he was 16 and didn't know any better at the time. Now, I know what you're probably thinking. No, he wouldn't. He knows how much she hates that name, and still, she'd need to sign the paperwork too. My fellow peoples of Reddit, I regret to inform you that Paul forged Sarah's signature on the paperwork and waited until she was out of surgery to hand said paperwork over. My sweet nephew, who was born on Valentine's Day, was named Valentino on his first official birth certificate. I still to this day don't know why Paul and his family were so insistent about the name. He had even picked out a different name with my sister. And before you ask, no, he was never brought up on forgery charges because his parents were witnesses to her signing the papers, even though they only got there at the last minute. So Sarah dumped him and got her son's name changed a month later. She was willing to do split custody with him because that's her son's father and she wants the kid to know him. But Paul vanished and she never heard anything back, which seemed weirdly out of character to us. Until a mutual friend on Facebook was tagged in his wedding pictures 6 months later. Paul had apparently started cheating on her not long after she got pregnant. Sarah was livid, but there wasn't much she could do, so she filed for child support and continued to live her best life. Until 6 years later. This is where the revenge starts, my friends. So Sarah has been a single mother for the past 6 years and has been amazing at it. At this point in my career, I have been a hairdresser for about 8 months at our local Great Clips. I'm working one day, and who is seated before me but Jane, Paul's wife herself. I take her back for a trim, and she clearly has no idea who I am. That adds up because a mutual friend that still keeps in contact with Paul said that Jane doesn't know a thing. She has no idea about Sarah, that she was the other woman, or that Paul actually has a kid that he's been, infrequently, paying child support for. She's in the dark on it all. I told myself not to be an ass and treat her like a normal customer, which I did. Now at this point, Jane was heavily pregnant, so a lot of her conversation was about that. She loved being pregnant, but it was hard. Her husband was so unsympathetic. Big shocker. And she was due in 10 weeks, and they still hadn't picked out a name yet for their baby girl. Ladies and gentle peoples, this was my chance. I asked what kind of name she was looking for, and she said, I want something unique and unusual, but not ridiculous like Brantley Lele. You know the ones I'm talking about. And Paul had suggested so many already, and she didn't like any of them. So I, conniving little weasel that I am, said, what about Sarah? My sister's name isn't actually Sarah. She was named after an older family member that passed not long after she was born, but there was no female equivalent for his name, so our parents created one. It's a beautiful name and just what Jane was looking for. She loved it. She stuck by it. And I found out by stalking her on Facebook months later that she had put her foot down about it and that this was their daughter's name. Now Paul has a daughter with his ex's name to remind him every day about her and also remind him to pay the fucking child support. Little nephew is 10 years old now and with a new name and no contact with his biological father. Though we do still sometimes call him Val as a family nickname. He likes it, but doesn't want to bring it to school, so it's staying a family nickname. Sarah pretends to hate it when we call him that, in a joking way. As long as he likes it, she doesn't have a problem with it. And she's seeing a new guy who's really great and like a father to Val. Aww. That is so savory though. Ooh. That serves him right. What kind of person pretends like they don't have a child and gets with another person within 6 months? Like, you would have to have dated that person for a while, right? Before you, like, start getting married to people. So, yeah. Paul is an asshole, and he deserves every bad thing coming to him. Karma's a bitch. That's it for this time. I hope you had a wonderful time and enjoyed this new wonderful subreddit. Do comment below if you agree with my judgment and what you think about the individual stories. And, subscribe, leave a like, share it and whatnot with your friends. That would be so nice. I post every Friday Reddit reading videos, and soon, every Wednesday, I will be posting my new true crime series, Crime Lime with Roux. It's gonna be so good. I hope you're excited. So yeah, subscribe for all that awesomeness. Thank you so much to my wonderful patrons, Capra, Magdalena Wurska, Cami, Ellie, and thank you so much to Jess F for giving me a Ko-fi. Y'all are awesome. Thank you for believing in me. See you later, alligator. By the way, someone commented that they want to know the life of my alligator. His name is Carl. And we wear matching Crocs, and we hang out all the time. So yeah. Does that answer your question? See you next time. Crocs for cracks. Cracks for cracks. Crocodiles wearing Crocs. 'Cause they're the most comfy shoes in the universe, and anyone who says not are lying. They're not pretty, but damn, they're comfy.